Привет, I'm Chuck Olinik, a Ukrainian-American baptized with the name Yaroslav, and that's the name I use in the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm known as Yaroslav the Persistent, or Yari. I've been covering in my videos called Tales of the Borderland, Slavic myth and mythology and Slavic folklore and Slavic customs, and a lot of Slavic history. This is my fourth part in the series on the Mongol Conquest, although I've actually done 10 videos either about the Mongol invasion or about primary sources written during the invasion or folk tales that evolved out of the invasion. Well, here we're going to deal with the time period often called the Mongol Yoke, at least the overall changes which befell Russia during that roughly 250-year period. And then what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to back up to cover Alexander Nevsky in another video. I'm going to have to cover the revolt of Dmitry Donskoy and the Battle of Kulikovo, the first defeat of the Golden Horde, in another. And then we'll finally get around to Ivan III's role, or Ivan the Great's role, not Ivan the Terrible, okay, and his standoff at the Ugra River. The principalities became part of the Jochid appanage ruled by Batu. Batu cited a semi-nomadic capital called Sarai, or Sarai Batu, Batu's palaces, on the lower Volga. The Jochid appanage came to be better known as the Golden Horde. Okay, what were the effects of the invasion upon the land and the people? Well, okay, that one's real obvious. There's a whole lot of dead people. The invasion had significant consequences on the population. Many cities and fortified points were wiped out with only a fraction surviving. The once flourishing cities of Kyiv, Novgorod, and Vladimir suffered a sharp decline, with their populations shrinking to a fraction of what they were before the invasion. In February of 1246, the Pope's envoy, Giovanni da Pian del Carpine, he traveled through Kyiv. That's the 6 years after the siege, and he wrote, "They, the Mongols, attacked Russia, where they made great havoc, destroying cities and fortresses and slaughtering men. And they laid siege to Kyiv, the capital of Russia. After they had besieged the city for a long time, they took it and put the inhabitants to death. When we were journeying through that land, we came across countless skulls and bones of dead men lying about on the ground. Kyiv had become a very large and thickly populated town, but now it has been reduced almost to nothing, for there are at the present scarce 200 houses there, and the inhabitants are kept in complete slavery." Kyiv, that city had about 50,000 people in it, right? It was the crown jewel of Kyivan Rus. Well, after the siege, where it fell in 1240, there were 200 houses left. There were overall estimates as far as the change in the population in the lands of the Rus from 7.5 million to 7 million. If you were in an outlying area, you were luckier. Northwesterly principalities like Novgorod or Pskov or Smolensk, they survived the onslaught, but they had to really endure direct subjugation and become tributaries of the Golden Horde. Maybe if the Russian princes had decided to get along with each other and make peace, maybe they could have averted this. But that wasn't the case, and further miscalculations, Russia would forever pay a price in terms of changes in religion, art, language, government, even geography. Novgorod, or the Novgorod Republic, continued to prosper, basically because they gave up real fast. And Moscow actually began to flourish. Well, now that you've had the cities declining, guess what? You're going to have a decline in culture and crafts and trade. So, pre-Mongol period, at least around Kyiv, that was like the heyday. And when the conquest happened, a lot of the cities fell into decay. Well, a lot were burned to the ground. And stone construction was halted for a time. The production of real complex crafts like glass jewelry and cloisonné enameling and granulation and all that sort of thing, that's going to stop. And basically, the Russian handicraft industry, it's going to regress a number of centuries. Also, with what had ended up happening, the economic ties between the cities and the surrounding villages, those are pretty much severed. So let's assume that you were one of the Rus who didn't end up dead at the end of the Mongol conquest. As a result of the invasion, many people were forced to flee in front of the advancing Tumans of Batu, and in northeastern Rus, residents of the Vladimir Suzdal and the Ryazan principalities sought refuge in more northern lands beyond the Volga. Others fled to sparsely populated areas, taking refuge in dense forests. However, after the departure of the Mongol Tartars, most of them returned to their former places of residence. There was also enforced conscription. Many Russian men fought for the Mongols far away from their homes. Many never saw home again. You might also be used to attack neighboring principalities, which will bring us to the case of Moscow. So how did Moscow become a big deal? How did it eventually become the city in Russia? Well, okay, it's founded about 1147, and it surrendered pretty early to the Mongols. And eventually what's going to end up happening is, because of the invasions that had taken place by the Mongols, you have a lot of people migrating from the south, and they're moving up towards Moscow. Also, in addition to drawing people, Moscow's drawing wealth, it's developing trade links. And after the Prince of Tver began an uprising in 1327, the rival prince, Kyivan Rus of Moscow, he joins the Mongols, and he helps them crush Tver and devastate the lands. And the thing is, Tver was a rival of Moscow's, so the competition's been eliminated, and Kyivan is allowed to become, he gets the title of Grand Prince by the Mongols, and now Moscow is going to become kind of an intermediary. They are to gather together the different cities and different territories and collect the taxes from them. And as the taxes are being passed on, some of the taxes, they kind of stick to Kyivan's fingers. And so Moscow becomes like the city that the Mongols will look to. Some of the people are getting out of line. You want to deal with that? Check out what happens in the judicial sphere. Kyivan Rus times, capital punishment was something pretty much applied only to slaves. The Mongols come in, capital punishment becomes widespread, the use of torture becomes a regular part of the criminal procedure. Specific punishments introduced into Moscow included beheading for alleged traitors and branding of thieves with execution for a third offense. Probably because you're running out of obvious places to brand somebody. The Mongols were creating a more centralized state, not just with direct rule and military might, but also by means of census tabulation, changes in currency, a method of collecting taxes. I'll get to those things. And a postal road network the Mongols called the Urtu, or Ortu, and the Russians preserved as the Yam. They kept it even after the Golden Horde disintegrated. It had relay stations providing food, shelter, and spare horses, allowing some messengers to cover between 120 and 190 miles in a single day. Obviously, the system sped up the spread of information and intelligence, which allowed for control. Of really great importance to the Mongol overlords, census tabulation, which in a way is kind of funny considering how many people the Mongols killed off. But okay, census tabulation, that was about collecting taxes. And that shouldn't really come as a surprise. I mean, look at the Doomsday Book in England. It's about figuring out how much each fiefdom owed the crown. So, all right, you've got a dual system of regional administration. There's the military governors, Baskaki, and then there's civilian governors, Darugi. The Baskaki are there, they're dealing with the populations that didn't submit quietly. The Darugi, they are the ones who they basically got the easier job. And sometimes their authorities overlapped, and sometimes they kind of conflicted with each other. But this is about collecting the tribute. Another change that the Mongols made. Kyivan Rus used to mint coins, but then I guess in time they kind of switched over to trading in furs. And so, for instance, the absolute cheapest fur, or cheapest denomination represented by a fur, that was a squirrel pelt. All right. The Mongols, they are reintroducing coins. A lot of those coins were coming from the Golden Horde, but that's going to start getting the northeastern Ruslands to start minting coins like the ruble, the kopek, and the denga. Denga's from a Mongol word. All right, and that's going to basically make trading easier. I would guess that collecting tribute and taxes in coin was probably a lot more efficient than dealing in furs and other goods. So during this period of the Mongol Yoke, the Mongols are ruling over the former Rus principalities, and that's going to actually bring a lot of the Slavic and the Mongolian ruling classes together. They're going to interact a lot more, at least the ones that aren't dead, all right? And, okay, by 1450, the Tatar language becomes very fashionable in the court of the Grand Prince of Moscow, Vasily II. By the way, he was accused of liking the Tatars too much and their speech. But a lot of the court were using the language. Also, a lot of Russian noblemen adopted Tatar surnames. There's some examples here. Vielamov family, they adopted the Turkic name Aksak, and the descendants are the Aksakovs. Okay, and many Russian boyar families, noble families, they trace their descent from Mongols or Tatars. And there was a survey in the 17th century, something like 15% of the noble families had Tatar names. Okay, but that's kind of a thing where two cultures, when they run into each other and they have contact with each other, they interact, and words are going to jump from one language to another. Example here in the US, Spanglish. All right, so I just found out today certain words like dengue, which was a term for Mongol money becomes money in general. And I'll get to the money thing, in a bit. Now, one of the other words that jumped out at me, davai. Davai is originally Turkic. I didn't know this. I've heard the word all my life. You know, the connotation is to give. Давай, give it to me. Except that, at least that's the way my family used it. Except that in reading a bit more about it, there was more the connotation of let's go. You know, давай выпьем. Let's get drunk. Oh, okay. Or just давай, hurry up, let's go. Just one of those things when two cultures collide, words are gonna, pop up in each other's languages. So this was the simplified view of what happened for about 250 years, as far as, the period of time known as the Mongol Yoke. All right, next time out, I'm going to take a look at the city of Novgorod and what's going to be going on with Alexander Nevsky. Until the next time, do побачення.